Meeting to order on September 11th. If we please have a roll call.
Rand. Ballard. Harris.
Here.
Lobbyists. Markham.
Here.
O'Gallagher. Here. Parker. Staley. Berry. Also present, Mr. Woods. We have a quorum.
If you could please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Everybody, if we can please take a moment of silence for 9/11. No women and men lost. Thank you. We can please have approval of minutes for the regular meeting on June 12th.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Okay, we are going to move swiftly on to our federal lobbyist. We have Brett and Jim come up. We have you now live. We don't have you in that little.
Pardon me?
We have you live now.
Oh, yeah.
We have you in that little box.
Okay, good.
You can push the.
Okay. All right. Start. No, you're right. Good morning, everyone. Well, thank you, Madam Chairman, members of the County Board. Thank you for allowing us to be here today. As you know, we try to come out a couple of times, at least a couple of times during the year, to update the board and the county staff on our federal agenda in Washington, and to get a sense of what the emerging priorities are for next year. And so this is part of that regular process. I'll just recap a little bit of what we have, what I think we've accomplished this year, and then Brett, I think, will speak to some of the specific priorities that were in our federal agenda for federal fiscal year 2019. You know, we start, as we do every year, we start with putting together the federal agenda, working with Reagan and Nick and county department heads on identifying those priorities and putting them into a concise agenda. I would just say that this has proven to be a really valuable document for the county, particularly with our congressional delegation. It gives them not only a sense of what the real priorities of the county are, but it's also a good reference document that they use throughout the year, throughout the legislative process. If they ever have any questions or something, there's a reference right there on their desk. So, you know, I commend the county for doing this, and I encourage us to continue to do so. So we did submit the federal agenda to the delegation in February of this year. Congress came back in January. They had not been able to complete the appropriations process for the current year that we're in, 2018. They did complete that in March by passing an omnibus appropriations bill. That was part of what had been a 2-year budget that had been approved the year prior. So, and that budget was very beneficial to many of the domestic discretionary programs that we care about in terms of transportation and housing and law enforcement and job training. That omnibus appropriation continued to provide full funding for those programs. And Congress now is in the process of completing the appropriations process for fiscal year 19, which will start on October 1st. We followed that up with the May visit of the county board. The county board came out in May Speaker Moustis and Chairman Hart and other members of the county board. We had 2.5 days of excellent meetings. I think we met with every member of our congressional delegation on both sides of the Capitol. We had a number of very good meetings with federal agencies and the administration at DOT and HHS and the Labor Department. And those are really important not only for our specific agenda, but just in terms of relationship building. This is a continuation of these meetings that we've been doing for many years. And so now when we go back into these agencies, they know Will County. You have a track record. You have interacted with them. You have received grants from them. You have expended that money wisely and responsibly, and that only enhances your credibility and reputation among these agencies. So that was very productive, and we of course will continue to do that in the coming year. Let me just quickly give you a snapshot of where things stand now in terms of Washington and the legislative agenda. Congress, as always, was out of session for the month of August. They came back right after Labor Day, and they have a very full plate of a number of must-do items before September 30th, which is the end of the fiscal year, not the least of which is completing the appropriations process. They have yet to enact any of the standing appropriations bills for the new year, which will start October 1st. Unfortunately, there are only about 7 actual legislative working days left in this month. So obviously that's not a lot of time to get what is a major amount of work done before September 30th. More than likely, as they have done in the past, they'll have to revert to a continuing resolution to keep all the federal agencies operating after September 30th. If they are unable to enact the appropriations bills. The big question surrounding that process is whether or not the president would sign a continuing resolution without full funding for some of his priorities in terms of immigration and the wall and so forth. There's a lot of pressure on both sides of the aisle not to shut down the government, but it's always a possibility. That's something we'll be watching very closely. The other items that Congress must complete before September 30 is the FAA reauthorization bill. That program expires September 30th. The House has passed the bill, the Senate hasn't. There are a lot of differences, and again, I think it's going to be really difficult given the short amount of time, less than this month, to get that done. So that could also end up being a short-term extension of that program. And then 2 other big ticket items are the farm bill. Both the House and the Senate have passed farm bills. They've actually appointed a conference committee. The conferees are meeting this week to try and work out those differences. There are major differences between the House and Senate bills, particularly around the SNAP program. And so, there again, the question is, will they be able to finish by September 30th? And then finally, WRDA. And that may be the Water Resources Development Act. That may be an area where they could get this done by the end of the month. I believe conferees may have even wrapped up an agreement. Brett, you might have more current information on that just yesterday. But there has been a lot of progress and a lot of bipartisan support for a WRDA reauthorization. And then October 1st, Congress will probably adjourn for the month so that members can go home and campaign for re-election. Of course, big elections on November 6th. And then more than likely there will be a lame duck session of Congress after the election. And quite frankly, I think it could be a very robust lame duck session, likely to be a lot of unfinished business, as we discussed with FAA, Farm Bill, and other things, appropriations. So there'll be a lot of work to get done, and I think that oftentimes lame ducks prove to be very productive. So we'll see what happens there. And then, of course, with an election comes a new Congress. There'll be a new Congress seated in January. Regardless of the outcome, there are going to be a lot of new faces. I think the last count I saw was that there are already 80 or 90 members of Congress that have either announced their retirements or lost their primary or are running for another office. So, you're likely to see at least a third of the Congress turn over next January. So that just means new people, a lot more education, a lot more outreach, and we look forward to working with the county to do that. So with that, I'll let Brett talk a little bit about our agenda and some of the accomplishments we've had this year.
Thanks for having us here today. Good to see a lot of familiar faces. I think what might make the most sense is I'll start out with kind of the beginning of the year and then walk through where things were, and then kind of go through our successes. First of all, we started out with Nick and Reagan putting together the federal agenda, as Jim indicated. What was really great this year is that because of the freight study, we had some really strong substance to focus on infrastructure investment. So that took a major part of the federal agenda, and I just commend you guys for moving that forward. I really think that's positioned you well, both federally and locally. Those type of studies and that detail is what is necessary to really put yourself in a good position to get those dollars. So that was a really strong starting point for us, and then we kind of built around that with infrastructure investment, kind of the work you all have done on substance use disorder, and then we looked into economic development, and of course we still include several of the important issues that we discuss day in, day out, but those were kind of the top priorities. Once we got our federal agenda figured out, we wanted to determine when a good time was for you all to come into Washington. We decided on April. In between, finishing the agenda in February and April, we had to submit what they call programmatic requests, which is what every congressional office asks for in terms of federal programs and the levels they want to be funded at. Now, this isn't a sexy thing that gets covered, year in, year out, but it's a necessary thing, and we make sure that we let the delegation know that certain programs need robust funding, whether it's workforce investment, whether it's infrastructure investment, whether it's public safety. We cover several different programs that the county benefits from. We submitted those. Congressional offices really appreciate that. In fact, they look out for the way we present it to them. They kind of model what they do off of that. So that's kind of what we worked on February to March. You all came in, and also at the same time you were working with NACO on some of the NACO efforts, and we combined that into some of what we were doing in Washington. Of course, we were a little more specific, but worked in concert with NACO. You came out, as Jim indicated, we met with the entire congressional delegation, all the members. They want to take the meeting because they know what you guys are about. They know that they're going to learn something. They know that your priorities are on point and make sense for what they should be prioritizing. We met with the DOT, had great meetings with FHWA, which is the Federal Highway Administration, the modal agency. Met with FAA, HHS, the Substance Abuse Administration within HHS, and a few other areas. Following that, we kind of debriefed, figured out where we wanted to have follow-up opportunities. I know that there were some conversations with folks in the region with substance use disorder. You guys are just a model. You do an excellent job. I know that Speaker Mooses can talk about how we went in to talk to the Office of National Drug Control Policy. We're telling them about this issue, and they have no idea. And fast forward to now, and it's everywhere. And you guys, you hired Kathleen, and she's been absolutely fantastic for moving your program forward and trying to mitigate some of the issues with that. We continue to hold monthly grant calls. What we want to do is, on top of that, we send you competitive grant announcements weekly or bi-weekly, and we hold these monthly grant calls to make sure that we know if you're interested in something. We need to find letters of support to support your grant applications. It's just a good way to check in on those. There's a lot of discretionary dollars, and we do a pretty good job at Smith, Dawson, and Andrews of focusing and targeting and sending those type of program announcements to you all. So we appreciate your participation on those monthly grant calls. And, we continue, the Workforce Investment Board comes out annually for their visit, and we met with, when Caroline was out, we met with every congressional office, made sure they knew all the good things you guys were doing with them. So that was kind of the year up until now. Going back to where I first started, the freight study, I have to say again, because of that investment that you guys made, I feel very strongly that it positioned you for the federal formula dollars that you were awarded for your I-80 at 30 project that was located in the county. I know that was like $34 to $38 million. That's a lot of money. And then I know the project in Plainfield was another $20 million. That's $50 million is something to to take note of. And so I think you guys are well positioned to move forward. I continue to harp on this, that have your plans ready, have projects ready to go, because the federal government puts out, whether it's through the state formula or discretionary programs, these opportunities arise for infrastructure, and we want to make sure that we go after that. And then, we were successful in getting amendment language in the Defense Authorization Act. And we continue to have follow-up conversations with the delegation and telling them, where our economic development priorities lie and how they can be helpful. So, we look forward to ending the year. I think there's still, as Jim indicated, a lot going on. He mentioned the Water Resource Development Act legislation. It looks like they came to an agreement last night. That deals with all the flood mitigation and U.S. Army Corps of Engineers authorization projects. I don't think you guys have anything in the hopper now, but they're trying to move that process along every 2 years, and they've continued that path the last 6 years. So, potentially the next WRDA bill, you guys would be well positioned. So we'll open it up to questions. I know Don, you'll have a question about the waters of the U.S., so we can answer that. Just let us know.
Yeah, I guess my question was, that this court decision just came down and said that it'll be immediately enforced. And we do have some things going on with flood mitigation, and we've just finished a study with the Army Corps of Engineers on the DuPage River. So I guess I'm just wondering, is there any impact? What's going to happen if the joint conference came to an agreement last night? How does that change with the court decision handed down on the old version of the bill versus the new version?
Sure. So there's kind of two parts to that question. Really, the waters of the U.S. was not part of the Army Corps authorization bill. Really, what the Army Corps authorization bill is, they authorize a small set of projects that are just massive in scope. I mean, it could be $1 billion project, it could be $500 million, it could be $30 million. In this case, I believe it was 8. There's 8 to 12 projects. I'd have to look to make sure I have the right number. And then there's some tweaks to the way that you go through the project development stage and all that stuff. So that it's kind of focused, as you said. You guys do stuff to study. I know you said the DuPage River. That was probably part of a local core effort. I don't think it was wrapped into this bill, but we'll look into it. I think they're separate. In terms of the water of the U.S., as Jim had indicated, there was a bill agreement. Also, a lot of stuff happened last night, if you guys can believe it, in Congress. There were a lot of deals that were agreed to. So it looks like the House and the Senate are going to pass at least three appropriation bills before the end of September. One is a combination of energy and water, the legislative branch, and then military construction veterans. Part of energy and water, there was some language in there that ended up getting stripped out that would have blocked the waters of the U.S. rule. It was too controversial, so they had, in order to pass that bill, they had to strip it out. The court case that you referenced, it was handed down by a judge in South Carolina in the middle of August. I think it was the 10th or 13th. It impacts 26 states, including Illinois. What it says is that those states, the rule that was passed by the prior administration on the waters of the U.S. is in place. Now, there's a lot going on in the background. One, the EPA and the Army Corps, they do need to move forward with it, but they may be kind of slow moving on it because they are trying to work a rule to replace that. I think because of that decision, and I'm not going to get into the minutia, they may need to reconsider and make the rule process, the new administration rule process, if they want to move forward, more robust. There's a court case in Texas that's being decided that they actually stay the decision in South Carolina, so it would impact the whole country, and it would stop the 2015 rule. It hasn't been decided yet. Probably hear something in the next month. But what could end up happening is if the ruling stays and the 26 states move forward and things don't, things aren't followed under the jurisdiction, there could be litigation. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. This is going to be fought in courts unless a rule is moved forward and it's just moving too slow right now.
Yeah, I had a going what Don was talking about. When you're talking about the water, they talk about the definition of what was included in the scope of the Army Corps of Engineers as far as running water, because approximately 2 years ago there was an initiative to make ditches part of Army Corps. Anywhere that the water comes out of your spout or your gutter and kind of stays there for a while, it comes under the scope of the Army Corps. So that would impact all of our residents in a terrible way. And I'm just wondering if that's included in any of this stuff, because it's certainly not good for Will County or for anybody.
Yeah, so that what you're discussing goes back to that 2015 decision, or rule, the final rule, and that is right now is implemented in 26 states, including Illinois.
The old rules stay.
Yeah, the old rule still is in place because of the court decision.
Right, but now the new rules.
They're working on a new rule, and there's also court cases working to stop the 2015 rule.
Because I would say that would be a big priority for Will County if we don't want the rule changed.
And we actually weighed in back in the day and said we had some concerns. I think this was 2013. We sent in a letter saying that we had some concerns, some of which you just reflected, and they ended up passing a final rule in 2015, and so we're kind of at a standstill.
So I'm just real concerned about it, because where we live, there's flooding in people's backyards.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that flooding is movable water, which means it's part of the definition would make it Army Corps. So if somebody wants to do something in that yard, they can't do it because the Army Corps controls their yard.
Right.
So it's, that's something we have to stop.
Right.
Don?
I guess kind of my question is, in 2015 when the final rule was passed, then there was some litigation, and then there was an election, and the new administration came in, and they decided they were going to slow walk the implementation, if not stop it, right? So now we have a new bill. We have this court decision that says you have to enforce it immediately, but obviously the Army Corps of Engineers doesn't have the ability to enforce it immediately because they don't have the money, right? So they're still going to slow walk it regardless of what happens litigation-wise. So this effectively, this case in South Carolina doesn't have any immediate effect on what's going to happen to us, and more likely what happens with the conference bill that you were talking about from last night would have a bigger effect.
I'll just say this. There's a lot of unknowns right now. No one really knows how this is going to play out, and it's probably going to play out in the courts.
And the question is whether or not the administration comes out with a new rulemaking process, which is what I think the court in South Carolina is suggesting, that if they wanted to overturn this rule, they need to come out with a more comprehensive rulemaking
That
process.
decision forces everybody's hand to do something. Okay. Thank you.
You know what I wanted to ask you when you were, and I'm sorry, I meant to ask you last night even, about the FAA, of how they do that. I thought that was like a done deal, and now to hear that they're just going to go and kind of push the House deal.
No, the FAA bill, just like, transportation infrastructure, it needs to be reauthorized like every 5 years. And it's up for reauthorization. It's currently on an extension. The extension expires September 30th. House has passed its version of the reauthorization bill, the Senate hasn't. And they are talking quietly behind the scenes. They're actually trying to pre-conference the difference between the House bill and what the Senate wants to do, in hopes that they could come to some agreement before the end of September. But I'm told that the differences are so wide that it's unlikely that they will. So they'll probably end up doing another extension.
And that affects of how we, how we have on to our priorities of the tower. We're trying to get an air traffic control tower, so we need these dollars, even though no one would commit as we sat in that meeting. But it just kind of pushes it even farther, that hope.
Is there, when we go to DC and visit with our legislators, and, transportation is kind of the key to the universe for us here in Will County. Is there any value to us expanding our horizons beyond the Congress people who actually touch Will County? In other words, Sherry Bustos is on the Transportation Committee at Rock Island. She also has roadways that are on Interstate 80, you know what I mean? So is there any value to us talking to other people besides just our own Congress people?
Yes, there is. It's a very good suggestion. Not only Sherry Bustos, who of course is from Illinois, but other members. We've had other members of the committee come out and visit Will County, and there'll be a lot of new members. There will be a new chairman of the committee for sure. So I think we should invest some time in developing those relationships.
I mean, in the past, we visited like with Congressman Micah.
Right.
And at the airport, he was,
right.
whatever committee was in charge at the time. So we have reached out to other, especially leadership,
right.
Or leaders in committees. So we've done that in the past too.
Yeah, and it would be wise to do so again with the new Congress.